Well, the fundamental thing is that we have a wonderful set of crossings, and let's refer to that as the bridge and the ferry, but it's the Tamar crossings. And the one thing that, and we're sat here now today by the River Tamar, and we have this challenge in providing this crossing, and this, goes back to the 50s, after the war, when it was recognised we needed to increase that traffic flow to support our economy, both for Plymouth and for Cornwall. And the government at that time did not see it fit to invest in our area to build us a bridge and improve the ferry side. So we had to, as Cornwall Council and then as Plymouth City Council, come up with a request, and that started the Acts of Parliament to enable us then to finance and build the bridge and then to support the ferry activity. So that's the fundamental thing. And I think people sometimes forget that they go across their business, and quite rightly so. They go to the hospital, they go to work, they go to school, some of them, and they forget actually the wonderful pieces of engineering that we provide in enabling them to go about their everyday business or their everyday leisure or everything within this wonderful area of the Tamar crossings.
That's probably true of most things, isn't it? We take technology and the engineering for granted. We get on an aeroplane these days,
yeah,
or we get on a train. We no longer really ask ourselves, how does this work? We trust somebody else.
No, we don't. And I think what's important there, though, as the joint committee, though, it's our responsibility to provide that crossing 24/7, 365, or not, in that sense, and to do it safely. That's the fundamental point. But in all these positions, that isn't free. Now, we'd love, from the point of view of our local economy, and I might go back to the 50s and saying, well, why didn't the government, come in and provide those crossings for us? But they didn't. So we've had to, from that period of time, first of all, get the bridge built, a couple of million quid, and then keep it going and keep it to a level where it's open to provide that service. And the same thing with the ferries, the 3 ferries, so that they are serviced regularly, they're refitted, they're kept going, and our service availability is to the very highest level that we can provide. I'll come straight to you. When was the last time you couldn't cross the Tamar Bridge?
Oh, it would have been on an occasion when there'd been an accident.
It's a wind or it's a situation, it's very rare on the ferries. If you look at that recent storm we've just had, and I've seen some of the videos from the team, it was incredible that those guys and girls on those crews keep that service going for the people of the Rame and the South East Cornwall, that side, to enable them to go about their business, as I've said.
The economic challenge, though, for people, particularly in the South East Cornwall area, is that they need to travel to Plymouth or into Devon for work or for hospital appointments.
Absolutely.
And so the cost of crossing is seen almost like a tax for living in the area. And it's not fair.
And it's a reasonable statement, and I absolutely understood. So I'm a Soash lad, from that point of view, we're local. And I looked at that, and in fact, in the very first time I was elected as chair, and it's in the minutes, I sat there and tried to put across this point, well, why are we paying this tax? It took me 2 or 3 months, and I can remember the moment I was taken to a briefing in Bodmin, actually, taken through by the financial controlling side, to actually get to the bottom of this incredibly complex position. Why is there a toll on the crossings? Because other people say in other areas, there isn't. So, when I'll bring it up, 7 crossings and, different areas and up at the Woolwich Ferry and different places. Well, the fundamental differences there are political. At Severn, we've got a deal that was done with the governments in a devolution position, and I've raised it. And in London, we've got the general, the Air Sadiq, or Sir Sadiq now, in that area has made that policy to provide that service as free. Now, I'm sure that from a Cornwall Council point of view, and Plymouth City Council, and that's the point here, you have to get the agreement of the joint committee, which has been set up. You have to get the agreement then of the 2 cabinets, and you then have to get the agreement of all the members, the 50 odd in Plymouth and the 87 odd in Cornwall, to all agree as that is what we want to do and make it free. And I'm going to be quite frank, that's not going to happen in the short term, because even as we speak here today, we have budgetary restraints on us that we are trying to cover.
But you've said it, it's political, it's about devolution. The reason that the Severn Bridge is free is because it was devolved to Wales. Now, the Tamar Bridge and the Torpoint ferries are devolved to Cornwall Council and to Plymouth Council. So why don't you make it free? It's not the government, it's you.
And I understand that point, but sitting in a position where over the period of time where we started, we now have, and I discovered this, I came in as a local politician, we have a £44 million debt, which is a capital programme that are back to the security and the safety. We have to continue. I've got a situation at the moment. Do we spend probably £3.5 million on fire protecting our cables on the bridge? Well, why do we need to do that? Look at what we've just seen, some vehicle fires in some significant places. If that happened and we weren't protected, how quickly do you think you wouldn't be able to cross? And particularly also with the servicing that we have to do on the ferries. So we'd love to do that. Now, what's different? Now, when I came in, there was no resolution to even mention the word free. What happened? Now we've got the end of 2023, we resolved, and you and I can both go and look and go back to the minutes, 8th of December, I think it was, where there is actually a resolution now where we are going to work with government to look to the abolition of tolls. We've never had that before. So we're now working with our government, the government in this sense, and that doesn't help because we had a change of government in the middle of that, a change of ministers. We've had even more changes of ministers again now. And in all these cases, it comes back to people. And people have to believe that that is now the desire of that joint committee for the first time in 60 years to abolish the tolls. But, and let me make this very, very clear, that's not tomorrow. We need changes in the Acts of Parliament to enable us to do that, to secure the funding, because it's only going to come from one of three places. The residents of Devon and Cornwall's council tax, the tolls that would be charged, or from central taxation. It's 1, 2 or 3, and that's our challenge in getting that mix and change right.
Within the big pot of money that pays for the whole of Tamar Crossings, though, you do have quite a bit of wriggle room to move things around. For example, the bridge subsidises the ferries.
Correct.
If it wasn't for the bridge subsidising the ferries, it would cost about £10
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. King Harry is very similar. Very similar. Yeah.
And so that's a political decision you've made to make the ferries more affordable, and probably I venture to suggest most motorists crossing the bridge think that that's unfair.
Well, that's interesting you raise the point, because in consultations that we've had, and I'll come back to the point, we've never had a joint committee that has proposed in the consultations a differential in price between ferry and bridge. And it was wholeheartedly rejected by the public in those consultations. So actually, you've got to get this balance, because there's the environmental position, because it's a damn long way to drive round, and it's another 40 minutes on your journey, and you want to get to certain places. Clearly, also, don't always think that the traffic is one way. We're seeing a significant amount of the economy of South East Cornwall also now being driven to from Devon. And we can see this in our figures. So there is that balance on that basis. But fundamentally, the differential was proposed, and it was rejected by those consultations.
But you mentioned it there. There's another bit of wriggle room that you do actually have. You've got a bit of discretion. You have the Tamar tag, which offers a significant discount to people who hold
the largest discount, yeah.
And
yeah.
Anybody can apply for a Tamar tag.
Of course they can.
Right.
Yes.
Well, why not use your discretion there to make it better targeted? So people with a certain postcode, or people in the South East Cornwall constituency, people in the Plymouth parliamentary constituencies, they could have it, but nobody else could have it. Because if it's one that everybody can have, are you not missing a
Graham,
trick?
great idea.
People driving into South East Cornwall.
Great idea. Fantastic. So why haven't we done it?
I don't know. Why have you not?
The Act.
What?
We've got to change the Act. How do we change the Act? We need a King's Speech. To do that, we need a government that is going to support that activity. And we've not been in the position before in those 60 years. And it's a bit like the stars lining up, where I actually believe we have both the cabinets, both of the councils agreeing, all of our MPs now agreeing that that is a strategic way forward to look at cheaper tolls for locals, of course. Now, you've mentioned the tag, But one of the challenges also we have to do is update our technology. That's a continually evolving thing. Now, that is where we've introduced what was now being called the Tamer 250 plan. It's a 9-point plan. And a key part of that is to upgrade our technology and to enable us to give that ability for the systems to differentiate what type of journey is it, where are people going, do we incorporate it if it's a hospital journey, is that a different rate to what it could somebody that doesn't travel that often but is in a situation, you go to the hospitals now and you're in a serious situation, you do actually get reduced or free parking. So the principles are there, and we're also looking at cards for joining in with rail, working with things. Ironically though, it's part of that technology that prevents us, because then people, if we don't have a speedy crossing, people get upset because then we get more queues, and that damages the environment and it damages people's lifestyle and health. So all of that is a balance. But what I'm pleased to say is that we had the local partnership report that resolved and done, and it was done to the standards of the Government Treasury Green Book. So we have to, it's pretty confusing for us, let alone other people. But you go through that and it's in the language of the Treasury, and we understand where we need to get to. But we then come back to, strategically, it's bigger than just Devon and Cornwall. We also have to get Peninsular Transport to agree, because it affects the whole of the strategic road network. And have we achieved that? Yes, we have. Excellent. So we've now got strategic support from Peninsula to help us in that goal.
Now, that leads us towards the hot topic of the moment, I suppose, devolution, and whether Cornwall and Devon would ever become a combined authority under the leadership of a directly elected mayor. If that happened, does that not create a fantastic new opportunity to intervene on the cost of crossing the River Tamar? You said it's strategically vital. If you've got a strategic authority responsible for it, then that would be addressed.
I think what we have to do at the moment is, and I'm sat here now literally next to this wonderful river, and we work now every day. I sit on the police and crime panel, I mentioned Peninsula, I sit on the national landscape. We work on both sides of this river every day. So to rule out now that opportunity to say, no, we're not going to do this. What won't change very clearly is that there is a border down the middle of that river. That's one of our biggest advantages, of course, and I will proudly support it. Look at where I'm sitting. I live here on the border guard. You could say that isn't going to change. But and you've mentioned the word devolution, we have to look at those opportunities and at least discuss and look. That is not a commitment to say, though, that is an agreement of what we're going to do. We've just got to have those discussions.
I think people are saying all the time that this devolution debate, it's a process, not an event.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a few years, and I've not heard anybody say that on anybody's agenda, let's abolish Cornwall, let's not abolish Cornwall Council.
Not at all.
They're
not at all.
not even being talked about.
No, not at all.
But that there are areas where it makes sense to cooperate, and for what is it now? More than that, 60 years nearly, we've been doing it with the police.
Absolutely, and I sit alongside Alison Hernandez. I'm actually the vice chair of the Police and Crime Panel. So I see that operation every day of both sides of the Tamar in this case. And let's not forget North Cornwall and other areas, but it's not exclusive to that. But it's all over. But we have a difference in our fire authorities. So there's a difference there. What would the impact be there? Because you have Devon and Dorset, but you have Cornwall. So that's a different mix. So certainly the fact of not ruling it in, but not ruling it out, and particularly at this time when we're discussing this now, in just following the new year, in that sense, it's absolutely on our minds to investigate every way forward. Now, I think what's important there is working with our MPs in those discussions, and we have got a fairly unique position at the moment now, where we have all three MPs. On each side locally, we've got Fred and we've got Luke and we've got Anna, all from, therefore, the ruling government side, where we have that voice to be able to put the position for the residents of both sides of the river. And if you listen to what they're saying, which is the same as what the Joint Committee is saying, we are looking at cheaper tolls for locals at the point, but we need the technology to be able to do that. We've got to get that Act of Parliament changed to enable us to take that forward. But be very clear, that cannot be done immediately. It's, you know, we've got, I can see 2 years probably, you know, with the following wind, because if you tried parliamentary process.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's suggesting it's going to happen
Immediately.
But some people are suggesting that the devolution agenda is a big tool that could be used in improving the economic viability of the Tamar crossings, because you'd be sharing the burden across a much larger.
Of course. And I totally agree. But what I'm so pleased is that the Joint Committee, at the end of 2023, put in place the Tamar 250 plan, which incorporates the methods and the way forward. And remember, we resolved, first time ever in 60 years, to look at abolishing the tolls. And that's where that should take us.
Let me ask you then, as a Conservative politician who's on the Joint Committee and who's a Conservative cabinet member for Cornwall Council, what is your view on the devolution debate at the moment? We've seen one of your cabinet colleagues, Ollie Monk, go on television and say he thinks that Cornwall's missed a trick and that we should be getting stuck into the devolution debate. We should be there at the table. We should be electing a mayor to send to the Council of the Nations and Regions, and we shouldn't be walking away and just wrapping ourselves up in the flag of St Piran. But we should be your leader, Councillor Linda Taylor, is saying no, it's got to be just the Cornish footprint. We're not interested in talking about anything else. What's your view?
My view, and you know, I'm not here today to say one way or the other on devolution, because I think I'm making it clear from a Joint Committee position. We've already started our discussions to be working both sides of this river, as that resolution was back in 2023. So alongside that, we've got to look at the framework that will be presented. Now, the government have put their white paper forward, and those are all the options there are being considered. So I'm not going to go one way or the other at the moment, because we're right in the middle of that position.
It's true to say, though, isn't it, that if Cornwall just wraps itself up in the flag of St Piran and does nothing else, you're going to be missing out.
Well, we haven't done that as a joint. I can answer here as the Joint Committee. You know, as I've said, with all these things we've already worked with, we are already working alongside. So I've made it very clear, there is a red line down the middle of that river that I live behind, and that will not change, in my opinion. But this isn't what we're talking about. What we're looking at is how we work better with our colleagues on the other side of the river and central government in providing the solutions. And that Tamar 250 plan, which I'm very pleased was resolved by both cabinets, by both councils, and has been supported now and agreed by, you know, the government are looking at it, which was the local partnerships report that we did. We're moving along in that direction.
Regional transport just makes sense, doesn't it? It's not only the Tamar crossings, you've got the A30, regional airport policy. I mean, some people might think it's... while Plymouth City Council might dream of bringing back their airport, it's hard to see an economic case for it when you've got Exeter Airport, Newquay Airport, Bristol Airport, all within reach, you know, one way or another. So, where do you think we go next? If let's park Tamar crossings just for a minute. But in terms of regional transport, how are we going to progress that? Just as Cornwall Council.
Well, the fundamental thing, and I speak now as a member of the Peninsular Transport, we have to consider all those strands. It's ironic, actually, in the very short term, and I'll bring it up, we're going to have an impact in the very near future in relationship with National Highways and the Saltash Tunnel. We are appreciating, you know, there will be some closures and challenges and journey times and everything else. It's for them to tell us what they are going to be, and they'll announce that. But what it has already done is that we can see it as a bit of a paradigm shift to say to people, look, hey, the challenge, you know, you want to drive across there at any time, at any place, anywhere, it's a bit like that. Well, actually, you might want to consider the train, because actually it's quicker. And actually, in a lot of cases, you can argue it's cheaper, you know, particularly with some of the great fares. We've also got our bus network, and I'm also very conscious that we've worked very closely with Citybus now in the Cornwall side and in the Plymouth, in incorporating that position. We need to do more. We have to ensure that more residents in Cornwall can get a better bus service to go to Derriford Hospital. Of course we do, but it's that change. And active travel, working with Beryl Bikes, getting people, and the wonderful thing that I'm also very close to my heart here physically, we're looking behind me, is to improve the ferry services. Why is it that you can go to the Dart and you can go to the Fowl and you can catch a ferry and go up and down, whereas we haven't got that north-south element in this part of the world? And that's something we're encouraging, particularly actually I say with the support of the Joint Committee, but also with Saltash Town Council, who've worked hard last season. We've already seen a success from Royal William Yard up to Saltash. Now, wouldn't that be great that we take it up further? We've got Coteau, we've got the other side of the river here, and we've potentially then got a mainline railway going up through, which I'm convinced will come back into service at some point. And we connect to Tavistock, we connect to London. So it's about putting all these things for the public on the table and saying, look at this, consider all these different options. And I'm going to come to a final point in that. And this is about our longer term investment. I have a director of a particular global company who I know. And, you know, their world in 20 years, which we consider to be, you know, you'll push a button and you'll jump in a drone and you'll go. Why do we need a bridge? Why do we, you know, and that's happening today already in the Far East, where the change in the way people get from A to B. And that's the other challenge when we're talking about financing earlier. The change that COVID made to us in the patterns of people working from home. You know, we've seen our revenues drop 10%. And it's continued. It's not going back up again. Other industries it has, but ours hasn't. And that's a lot of money. And that's part of the challenge of where we're going through at the moment, the crisis, you know, quite literally. We will run out of money literally at some point within 2025, and that's why we had to do the toll increase. Now, unfortunate as it was, because we have to protect the infrastructure. That's critical. But unless we magic up a whole load of new people to come across, which is environmentally wrong, because we're trying to reduce emissions, we're trying to reduce queuing and everything else. Now, one of the ironic, you mentioned the A30 just now. There's signs down at Bodmin, and actually they, you know, they'll indicate they're probably lane studs at the moment, but that's been improved, that's been changed. But fundamentally, I could argue to National Highways, can you put a sign up there, please turn right here and go across the bridge because we need the money. And that would actually, it's ridiculous, of course it is, but we do see it in Cornwall. And you know, it's really sad when we get some significant accidents on the A30. The bridge, we can see what happens, you know, and we're struggling to cope with all that traffic in one go. And you know, then you start to get the classic queues, no matter what. Now that brings me on to a point I really want to stress as part of the 2050 plan, is we have to look at removing those toll booths. That's a really important part of moving forward, environmentally, improving the speed of flow, and that's to go to open road tolling. So that's a position like Dartford, you know, and the other areas where you flow through and you enjoy, therefore, a much better journey.
All of the things that you talked about are fantastic, and the idea of, if not swapping, then supplementing 30-year-old ferries with drones that they're using in the UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Far East, Middle East, of course.
Would be fantastic. You say also, you know, the tunnel is about to be refurbished by National Highways.
Yes.
Well, you're going to get the blame for it, aren't you? Because the people are going to say, oh, well, it's Tamar Crossings.
We will get the blame, but that's part of my role, is to shout loud enough and say, it's not us. But the important thing there is, and I've been really pleased with National Highways in how they have engaged and worked with the Joint Committee, or the team in that sense, particularly in the structure and the management and traffic flows, because we've got a lot of experience. Now the good news is through investment, back to Tamar 2050, is we're about to launch to the public a new information system so people can see the real-time traffic flows. And National Highways will be able to share in that, the public will be able to share, and be able to say, well actually I need to go to wherever now. When's the best time to go? Is it the now? And that will be a significant number of routes. And I'm not just talking about the bridge deck. We're saying Callington, across the Devonport. We're saying Liscar. We're looking at different routes. 4th Street in Saltash, at Stevens Road. So people will be able to understand and come in the other way from Crown Hill. And looking at those routes and what are those best things. So if you're used to using handheld technology, think like Google Maps, and it shows you, the bridge will be offering that service to our customers free of charge to enable them to make those better choices, and technology helping us do that.
But it's just going to take so much money, isn't it? I mean, to move to toll-free
Yeah.
number plate recognition tolling, for example,
Yeah.
drones.
It is,
having your own pot of revenue so that you could take responsibility for the tunnel rather than a different government agency having to do it. All of those things, it's just not going to happen with two local authorities, Cornwall Council and Plymouth Council, whose electoral cycles don't even match up. Never mind their political control.
That's true. I mean, look at what happened.
The jigsaw pieces are all over the place.
I'm at the end of the day, I'm a 17, 18 million pound a year corporate entity. We're not owned by the French, by the way. That's another thing that I get. No. We are owned by us. We're residents of Cornwall and obviously Plymouth. But we have a management team there, as the councillors, there's 10 of us. And Plymouth go through different cycles to us. We then lost a joint chair in Jonathan Dreen, who had a lot of time with Jonathan, who really understood. But then people have to relearn the position. And, here we come into next May's election now. And one way or the other, it's going to change. It's going to change. We know that. So where does that happen in the corporate world, that all of a sudden you lose half your board? And therefore you've got to re-educate. And it's good that we've had officers to support. And I have to pay tribute here to David List, who's for 27 years, been a key part of that. But thankfully, we've got new people coming through that he's helped to train up and bring up to speed at that situation. So now, here we are, beginning of January, we're ready to go to take this forward. But I'm also delighted to say, and it was announced at our last joint committee meeting, that we've brought in now to chair this 2050 plan consultative forum that we said we would do, Richard Stevens, who's a very experienced transport. I mean, he runs the buses in Plymouth, if you know Richard. And he's volunteered, thank you, Richard, to come in and bring that together. Because we've talked quite a lot here about people, but I'm also very concerned about our businesses. And we cannot leave that at the hauliers. It's all very well, but they're going up and down, and they're 7 times a day, 8 times a day. And we know, how much revenue that's coming from there. And that's an important pot. Now, we've had those discussions with the Road Haulage Association, and Richard is going to bring that through so that their voice is heard as well. What they're looking for, very much so, of course, they would like it free, but they also want reliability. They want to know that when they're quoting for their contract to be able to provide those transport services, that they've got the ability to not have to worry about, will the ferry be running or will the bridge be open? That's a fundamental. Now, unfortunately, in their business, can you tell me what the price of oil will be next week? You haven't got a clue. You can't. Can you tell me what the tolls will be if you're quoting for a 5-year contract? That's an important business. So what we're working on with 2050 as part of that discussion with the MPs is to have an agreement on something that we've never had, RPI, retail pricing. If we'd have had that, we wouldn't have been in the position where we had, because we've had on, off, jump. And that's not good for business. You cannot plan and predict on that. So as part of that discussion with our MPs is the agreement to take forward within that plan that we wish to do with the Act, that we can incorporate RPI. Now, in a business, if you want to do something, as long as it's legal, and get me right, if you want to put a different button on your till, you put a different button on your till. You just do it. You make a poor decision or sales management, and you do it. We can't, because it says you've got to change the same price, whether or not you live in Glasgow or you live in St Just or in Tor Point. So that's where that comes from. And that we have to do that in such a way that it falls within that legality. And I get kicked under the table more times than you probably consider that, Martin, you can't do that. You can't do that. And that's something that you have to learn. So that is probably one of the biggest frustrations for me, because that rate of change, that ability, because believe it, we're thinking about it, we're trying to. Can we do a situation, like in London, or in Dartford, they have very much a locals discount, 20 quid a year. Brilliant. Well, first of all, we can't do it because it isn't in the Act. But the other challenge then comes is, and you might have mentioned earlier, where do we draw the red line? Is it Saltash? Is it Liscard? Is it Truro? Is it Ivybridge? Is it Tavistock?
My village would do.
Exactly, and that's the thing. But there again, to get that agreement, then you've got to go back through the full councils. And what is going to be the position of somebody who's a Truro member versus somebody who's a Lanson member, or from Lou, or from whatever? So that's a difference. And on the other side, from Plymouth, maybe it might not be quite as important on that side. So we've got to bear that in mind. And the other thing, when we talk about Dartford and we look at that locals discount, who funds it? The government. They pay that bill. Do they pay ours? No. So, and it's quite interesting. Well, why don't you ask the government? How often have you gone in to have a negotiation with somebody and they come back with a letter and it says no? Right, now what are you going to do now? Well, you go back again and you keep going. But it's no. But I genuinely believe where we are now, I said we've done our resolution, we've got our 2050 plan, we've got this unique position in 60 years to actually have a chance of solving this.